contract. And as we saw in a previous recording, the default remedy, the usual remedy under common law or case law, as it's sometimes known, or judicial law, there is a right to receive damages and only damages. Remember, under civil law, the aim is to remedy the injured party, and it's not about punishment because that is under criminal law. Now, sometimes damages are not a suitable remedy. So, in this situation, what we turn to are our equitable remedies. And remember, equitable remedies are the gloss on the law, it's the icing on the cake. And these are discretionary remedies. We always look to damages first, then, if they're unsuitable, we look to the extra, the icing on the cake. We look to our equitable remedies of specific performance, or injunctions, or rescission. And we're going to explore these in more detail now. So, under case law, there is a right to receive damages, to receive compensation. It means monetary compensation for the injured party. When calculating damages, the courts will usually aim to put the claimant in the position that they would have been had the contract been performed properly. Remember, the aim is not to punish the other party because that is criminal law rather than civil law. Sometimes, though, damages are not the best or the most appropriate way to resolve a situation. So, this is where we turn to our equitable remedies, of which we have three. The first one we've got here is specific performance, and this makes you do something. It forces you to do something. It requires the person to fulfill their contractual obligations. The courts will not award, it's important to remember, they will not award this particular remedy of specific performance for personal service contracts. Imagine you book a singer for a wedding only to find out that they have double booked themselves. The courts in this instance cannot force the singer to appear in two places at once, so the only suitable remedy in this situation would be damages. However, a particular one that is listed as a remedy are one-off sanctions, such as the force of the sale of a property or land. Remember, equity is all about fairness, so if damages suffice in the first instance, we wouldn't go on to our equitable methods. Our second equitable remedy is an injunction, and this is completely the opposite to what we have seen with specific performance. An injunction is about stopping you from doing something. This directs a person not to break their contract. And there are three different types of injunction. The first one here is a mandatory injunction. This directs a person to undo something that they've done in breach of the contract. So, for example, if they've built a wall when they weren't supposed to, they can undo it. They can demolish the wall, and this puts them back into the pre-contractual position. A prohibitory injunction requires a person to honour their promise. And the example here, which you will possibly have in your contract at work, is to not work for a rival company. The third one here is an asset freezing injunction, and this prevents a person from dealing in assets. For example, preventing money being transferred to an overseas bank account if they're currently part of an investigation. The third equitable remedy is rescission. This remedy puts the parties back into their pre-contractual position. This allows a party to recover property transferred under the contract. So this restores a pre-contract position, and it's actually an all or nothing remedy. You are going back to the pre-contractual position. Let's think of as an example here. Let's say that I enter into a contract with you to buy your house. I buy the house from you and then I decide to knock it down. Now, it's not possible for us to resign to that contract. You sold me that house, and I now have a pile of bricks. I have a piece of land. We can't possibly go back to our pre contractual position, so we lose the right to rescind. This is only available if the contract can be completely rescinded, where the status quo can be restored. Having seen the remedies for breach of contract, we're now going to look at a few lecture examples. So let's start with lecture example 2. Which of the following statements is incorrect regarding the use of specific performance as an equitable remedy for breach of contract? The first one, it is often used to enforce contracts for the sale of land. This particular answer is correct. It's listed under specific performance. The second option, it's not available if damages are an adequate remedy. This one is also correct because we always turn to our common law first. It's only if damages are not appropriate we then turn to our equitable remedies. Our third option here, it is not available if the court cannot oversee performance, and this one is also correct. So the correct answer to the question, which statement is incorrect, is our final one. It is often used where the contract is for personal services. And we saw this in the notes specifically mentioned. The courts will not award this remedy for personal services contracts. Let's now move on to lecture example 3 about rescission. Which of the following statements is incorrect? The first one here, it puts the parties back into the pre-contractual position. This one is correct. Property transferred under the contract may be recovered. This one is correct and mentioned specifically. It's only available if the contract cannot be completely rescinded. And we spoke about this with the house and knocking down the house. This one is correct. It's an all or nothing option. The final option is our answer. Property transferred prior to the breach remains with its new owner. This is incorrect because it can be 100% completely rescinded. In lecture example 4, we have a mini scenario and we have Pablo, who is a buyer. He is the offeror. He asks Vincent if he may buy a painting. So there's been an offer, and the seller is Vincent. He is the offeree. And what happens next is that he agrees to sell, so there is acceptance. Then an hour later, names a price, and this is acceptable to Pablo, although no money changes hands. Vincent's family then persuade him not to sell. In the meantime, Pablo has made plans to display the painting in an exhibition for which he has sold tickets to the public. Where does the offer occur here? So going through our options here, Pablo's initial inquiry, this would not be an offer. He's just made an inquiry, can I buy it? So no offer in this first option. With Vincent agreeing to sell, this is nearer to an offer, but not quite there yet. It's not specific enough. No price has been discussed. In our third option, Vincent naming an acceptable price would be the position where an offer has been made. The final one, there is no offer made. This is incorrect. There has been an offer made. In part B, we're looking at the type of consideration. And with consideration, we're looking at something in value, something of value in the contract. And it must be provided by both parties. So here we have an agreement, an amount of money in exchange for the painting. So the type of consideration, we have executory, which means at some point in the future. And this is exactly what has happened here. It's a promise for a promise. The promise that they will buy in the future and the painting will go to the buyer in the future. This one's correct, it hasn't yet happened. The second option here is the present, executed. And this one is known as an act for a promise. This hasn't happened. He hasn't paid now with the promise of the painting in the future. He hasn't paid yet. And it isn't past. An action hasn't been performed, and then at a later date, payment being requested. And finally, the last one is incorrect. There's been no consideration. There actually has been discussed a painting in exchange for some money. In Part C, assuming the court agrees that there was a valid contract and finds in Pablo's favour, what remedy would be most appropriate? We have the options here of an injunction or an order for specific performance. So, obviously, under common law, they have established that damages would be inadequate because they've now gone to equitable remedies. An injunction is to undo something, perhaps to knock down a wall that was not supposed to be built, a mandatory injunction. So it's not this one. The answer would be an order for specific performance. And this requires the person to fulfill any contractual obligations. It can be used for one-off actions, for example, a sale. So here it would be to go through with the sale. Finally, are the remedies common law or equitable remedies? And we've mentioned already, these are equitable remedies that we turn to when common law damages are not sufficient. Hi, welcome back. We're now going to look at the economic environment. We're going to look at how the external business environment can impact on business operations. In particular, we'll look at the microeconomic environment, the profit motive, government control, an effective tax system, and government influence and spending. Let's first of all look at the microeconomic environment. There are actually two economic environments that affect businesses. The first one is the macroeconomic environment, and the second, the microeconomic environment. The macroeconomic environment is looking at the big picture, the health of the overall economy. The notes say that the macroeconomic environment in which all businesses have to operate incorporates two things. We have national influences and we also have global influences. Under national influences, we have business cycles that affect the way an organisation can operate. Here we're looking at various cycles of boom and bust, such as recessions. It also includes government policies, for example, fiscal policy about tax, borrowing, and spending, and also monetary policy, all about interest rates and access to credit. It also includes interest rates and how they change, exchange rates and how they move, and also inflation. Under global influences, we're looking at internationalisation of trade, the influence of regional economic groups such as the EU, and also globalisation of markets. And we go through that in another recording. It would also include employment, spending, and access to credit. So, really, here we're looking at political factors, economic factors, social factors, technological factors, environmental factors, and the legal environment as well. With the micro environment, we're looking at a smaller picture. And this encompasses supply and demand. The microeconomic environment is of a particular business in which they operate. It involves looking at how the market or the price mechanism works. So it's about the individual industries and the markets. It includes supply and demand, competition, and price changes. And we're going to look at this one in more detail. The microeconomic environment. We'll start off by defining what the market is. Imagine where you live. Think about your local marketplace. It's where buyers and sellers meet, and there is an exchange of goods or services for money, and that exchange will be the market price. So, in our notes here, it says that a market is any place where buyers and sellers meet to trade products or services. The market price is the amount that customers are charged for items, and this will depend on demand and supply. There are lots of different types of market. We have the goods market, so think about your market stall, where everyday products such as DVDs are traded, or perhaps apples. We also have something called the commodities market, and this is where raw materials such as wheat are traded. It could also be, think about the primary industry, cocoa, fruit, sugar, oil. And we also have the labour market as well. Let's pop that one in, where labour hours are exchanged. Think about you in the workplace, exchanged for a wage. Market prices change when supply and demand patterns change. So let's have a think about supply first of all. With supply, let's say that you are a grower of apples and there's been a bumper harvest. You have loads and loads of apples and you go to the marketplace to sell your apples. In this situation, there's lots of supply and therefore there would be a cheap price. Demand would be high. And the opposite to this, you may have had bad weather conditions and not many apples to supply at the market. So low supply, and these might be in demand, so a higher price would be charged. Strawberries, if we didn't have much sunshine, low supply and a high price. So these move due to many factors. The market mechanism is the interaction of supply and demand for a particular item, and I recommend you learn this term. Let's have a think about demand first of all. This is all about you going to the marketplace and identifying how many apples you want to buy. So, demand is created by potential buyers. It's a desire to purchase. So it's the quantity of a good that potential purchasers would buy or attempt to buy if the price of goods were at a certain level. There are changing patterns with demand. An increase in demand can occur following, for example, a successful advertising campaign. For example, if there's an advert on television by the government saying that if you eat lots of apples, then you'll look 10 years younger, I would certainly buy and eat a lot of apples. So here there would be an increase in demand, and this would lead in an increase in the price to the end customer. So many people might want to buy these apples to look 10 years younger, but supply is limited. Changes in market prices will affect costs. So, if the price of a commodity, for example, oil, goes up, this increases the price for a business to buy that oil. These can either be passed on to the consumer, so the price of oil increases to us as end consumers, so the business can maintain their profit levels, or these price increases can be absorbed by the business, in which situation we would charge the same price to the end customer, but there would be an increase in costs for the organisation. So it would squeeze the profit margins for that company. There are many factors that can impact on demand, whether we have high demand for a product or low demand for a product. And some are within the control of an organisation and others are not. So we'll look at these now. The notes say that there are many things which can influence the level of demand for a good or service. A number of these would classify as being within the control of a business. So, decisions that the organisation makes that can impact on demand for their products. The first one here is price. Organisations set prices for their goods, and by flexing the price, a business can increase demand for their product or service. For example, organisations might reduce the price for their goods, and this would usually increase demand because it's seen as being a bargain. Marketing research can also impact on demand, identifying what consumers want, understanding the customer, what they're willing to pay, what they want to buy. Different to this one is product research. So the first one here is about the customer, whereas the second one is about the product. Here, we're investing capital, we're investing money into our products and product development. So, for example, developing the latest iPhone with new features, and that will create demand. We saw earlier, Apple's making you 10 years younger will increase demand. Sales promotions, for example, buy one, get one frees, coupons, loss leaders, end of aisle positioning, offering samples, these will all stimulate demand. Investing in training of the sales force, making them better salespeople will increase demand. Think about those traditional double glazing salesmen that go door knocking. The effectiveness of distribution is also within the control of the organisation. It's all about getting the product to the right place, ready and on time for consumers to purchase. So it's all about timing. It's also about location. An organisation can decide whether they just focus their sales in the local marketplace or whether they go into nationwide shops. Whether they sell online would be another consideration. Also, after sales service, offering a good end of sales service to the end customer. So think about Tesco, they have a big focus now away from the product but towards the customers, and their slogan is every little helps. People expect quality nowadays and they go elsewhere if they don't get it. The final one here, which is within the control of an organisation, is granting the credit to customers. When organisations buy, there's usually an agreement between the selling company and the buying company. They may offer a 3-month credit period, and payment is due 3 months after that purchase date. So it generates interest, it creates sales, increases demand, and it helps organisations' cash flow. Demand can also be affected by factors which are outside the control of the business. The price of substitute goods. Now remember, substitute goods serve the same purpose. They fulfill the same need. So an example here would be Coca-Cola and Pepsi. If an alternative substitute product is cheap, so let's say Coca-Cola sell very cheaply, then this would reduce demand from the product that you're selling, which might be Pepsi. The price of complementary goods. Complementary goods go hand in hand and generally tend to be sold at the same time. For example, fish and chips. So if the price of a complementary good is low, so if we have a low price of fish, this will increase demand for fish, and because we sell fish at the same time as chips, it will increase the demand for chips as well. Consumers' income, your income. Think about your monthly wage. If you were to get a pay increase, you're promoted, that would increase your monthly wage, you spend more, and this stimulates demand. And fashion and expectations will impact on demand. This is outside the control of the business. It's all about what consumers want to spend their money on. So currently, for primary children, there's popular fidget toys. There's been a rapid increase in fidget toys. And for an organisation, there has been consumer demand for more ethical products. So increased demand for those ethical products. Let's move on now and look at supply. This is the other component of microeconomics. And supply is the quantity of a good that existing suppliers or would be suppliers would want to produce for the market at a given price. It's all about the goods or services available for consumers to buy. And like we saw with demand, supply patterns can change. An increase in supply can occur when a new business opens because we have new producers in the market. Imagine your town. Perhaps you had one bakery supplying bread, cakes, and packed lunches. A new bakery opens down the road and they're selling similar items. There'll be an increase in supply, an increase in choice of where you buy your lunch from, an increase in competition. Bakeries will want you to shop at their particular bakery, so they may reduce prices so that they compete against each other, so that they can gain your custom. Let's have a think about those factors that will influence supply. The first one we've got here is the price obtainable for the good. So perhaps an organisation buys a good and then they sell this on to you as the end consumer rather than making the product. The price at which they obtain the good will impact on the price they charge you, and also if it's a very cheap product, lots and lots can be purchased to sell on. The price of other goods. Earlier, we saw about substitutes with Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and we have complementary goods, which we also saw earlier. The price of related goods in joint supply. Let's think about cows here. Now, cows provide meat, milk, hide. It's also used in cat and dog food. So a company will be willing to supply less profitable, for example, dog and cat food and those parts of the cow because they obtain a good price for the beef and the milk and the hide. The cost of actually making the good will influence supply as well. The costs of production. If there's a reduction in the cost of raw materials and a reduction in the energy costs, an organisation will want to make and supply more to increase their profit margins. Changes in technology will also impact on supply. Advances in technology will increase speed and increase efficiency and allow organisations to produce more because they can and they're able. We then have other factors, for example, weather. Favourable weather leading to bumper harvests, unfavourable weather, droughts may limit supply. Earthquakes and floods, natural disasters can impact on the supply of goods, and industrial disruptions such as labour strikes or going slow will impact on production and supply. Let's have a look at lecture example 1 on supply and demand. What we need to do here is match the following statements on the left-hand side to the effect it will have on the right-hand side. The first one here is that a business invests in new technology, and this will lead to increasing its production output by 20%. Now, as we just mentioned, our changes in technology will affect supply. We're able to improve efficiency, improve speed, and we can produce more. So this one is about the supply of products. The second one here is the price of a substitute product increasing by 10%. So let's say that we are Pepsi and our competitor, also a substitute product, Coke, the Coke price has increased. This will have the impact of increasing demand for our product, for Pepsi. So it's the first option. Finally, there has been an increase in the price of a raw material. This cost will be passed on to the end customer. Now, for me as an end consumer, an increase in price will perhaps reduce the demand, will reduce how much I want that product, and I may search for an alternative and buy a replacement instead. Let's move on now and look at the profit motive. Profit we can write as our pi sign for short. And profit is the motivation of many organisations to maximise profit for the owners of the business, called the shareholders or the members of an organisation. It's all about increasing the net worth of a business, and it's the reasons why a lot of organisations exist. It's all about the desire to make money. In a free market where people voluntarily swap goods and services for money, the profit motive decides who gets what in terms of resources. In theory, the profit motive distributes resources efficiently. So it's all about who gets what. Let's continue with our idea of apples. We could sell our apples to a jam maker, or we could sell our apples to a juice factory. There is more profit, however, with the jam maker. We can sell to the jam maker and they'll pay a higher price. The selling price is higher because it's more valued by those customers, jam compared to juice. So it sends resources where they're most useful. Let's look at an example. The market price shows how valuable a product is to customers. So, for example, our jam maker. It tells businesses whether to bother making it. Let's say, for example, it costs a cake business £1 to buy the ingredients and £1 to make and package the cakes, making a total cost of production £2. If people will only pay 50p for a cake, we have a selling price of 50p, costs to make the cakes and package them £2, so they would actually make a loss of £1.50. This would be wasted resources by turning relatively valuable ingredients of £1 and effort £1 into relatively worthless cakes costing only 50p. If, however, people are willing to pay £3 per cake instead of baking themselves and sourcing the ingredients themselves, the business helps its customers. It adds value to the raw materials and makes a profit of £1 per cake. Crucially, the business is doing something useful, not out of kindness, but because it wants to make some money. So, profit can be defined as the surplus revenue after a business has paid all of its costs. It's the monetary reward to the owners of the business, and it plays an important role in creating incentives for a business or an entrepreneur. Let's have a look at the profit motive playing an important role in economics. We have a number of factors down the page which we'll look at individually. The first one is that the profit motive corrects undersupply or oversupply. For example, if people want more of a good or service in a free market and there's a shortage in supply, then the price that they're willing to pay will increase, and this will encourage the suppliers to make and supply more. So profit here is communicated by the market. The higher the demand, the higher the profit, and more organisations seek to do it. The profit motive also encourages efficiency. It will encourage businesses to cut costs and increase efficiency. This supports efficient use of resources, and it will encourage spending on spending on research and development to lead to better technologies. Let's take an example here. If we have a selling price of £5 and it currently costs the organisation £4 to produce, then there will be a profit of £1. However, if a business can become more efficient, they can still sell at £5, but they might be able to reduce their costs or their energy usage and perhaps produce for only £2. So their profit here would be £3. Innovation would be another part of the profit motive. Profit will encourage businesses to create new products. They'll be driven by profit. They'll also want to find new ways of doing things. They'll invest in innovation, inventing new products. Think, for example, about smartphones. As they come out, we have our early adopters who must have those brand new products. And for an organisation, they'll have a wider range of products to sell, and this will spread risk. The profit motive can also fund investment. Profit will enable a business to invest in growth and increase capacities. So they could perhaps invest in new machinery, which is more efficient, more quick at producing the goods. They could invest in a new warehouse so they can store more of their finished goods ready for sale, or perhaps to fund growth in the form of a new premises. Incentives here states that profit will encourage resources to be put into those areas that are profitable. For example, if an organisation has 5 products, but they earn most profit from 2 products, the profit motive would be to produce more of those 2 products and invest in them and develop them further to increase demand and sales. They may well decide to cease production of the other 3. The profit motive will also encourage employment and wages. It will increase employment opportunities. There's more affordability to take on new staff and to pay them wages, and this is good for the economy. Under government taxes, the profit motive is also a technical term used by taxing authorities to establish a basis for levying taxes. Profits are subject to taxation, and the higher the profit, the more tax will be paid. And this will be used for public spending, for example, improving services such as hospitals and education. So it helps society. And the profit motive finally helps determine what's an attractive industry and what is not an attractive industry. It may attract businesses to an industry, those where sales are high and demand is higher, and this will increase competition amongst firms. This will encourage organisations to further increase efficiencies and lower prices. So the profit motive is good in business. However, in reality, it's not the only motive, just to remember that. Profit is just one motive that a business can have. Let's finish off the recording by looking at lecture example 2. Which of the following statements is correct? The first one here is the profit motive will create an overuse of resources. This is incorrect because it will actually promote efficient use of resources. Remember our Apple example where the resources are being diverted to apple jam, where they are valued the most. The profit motive will result in a reduction of jobs and also wages. This would be incorrect because the profit increases affordability of new staff or promotion amongst existing staff. The correct one, therefore, is the final one. The profit motive will support the fair distribution of resources. Hi, we're now going to move on and look at a section in the notes called government control. Here we're going to look about how government can help the economy, how government can help businesses, how government can help society, and individuals as well. It's also about how government can discourage certain things. Government economic objectives include low unemployment, low inflation, and economic growth. And we'll look at these in turn. Low unemployment is a positive sign in the economy. It shows and indicates a healthy economy. It's all about having as many workers in jobs as possible because jobs offer a wage, job security, and a sense of well-being. It helps people not worry about penny pinching and it reduces financial struggles. It also helps with affordability. If individuals have disposable income, they can spend and this increases demand. The second one we have here is lower inflation, lower prices. Our lower prices contribute towards economic stability. It's about the purchasing power of money. For example, you might see on television advertisements that last year a particular basket of supermarket goods cost £5, and this year it costs perhaps £8.80 for the same goods. So there's been an increase in price, and this is due to inflation. Stable inflation is also important, having stable prices so that saving can be encouraged for individuals and investments in organisations. With economic growth, the aim is to produce more goods and services each year so that individuals have a higher standard of living, and that's the advantage with economic growth. Another one Another advantage would be allowing the increases in population numbers without reducing standards of living. Now, governments can also change the way businesses work and influence the economy, either by passing laws or by changing their own spending or taxes in the economy. For example, extra government spending or lower taxes can result in more demand in the economy and lead to higher output and employment. Extra government spending would be financed by either government borrowing from other countries or through the taxes that we pay as individuals. Spending might be on infrastructure, defence, hospitals, schools, or through welfare payments and benefits. Lower taxes would mean that individuals pay less tax, giving them more disposable income to spend, and this increases demand, it increases output, and it increases job opportunities and employment. Governments can also pass legislation protecting consumers. So, for example, statutory rights in contracts or regarding refunds, legislation about confidentiality with data protection, and perhaps rules about prices and the labelling of these. Legislation can also protect workers, health and safety rules and regulations, minimum wages. It also mentioned in the notes restricting where businesses can build new premises, so protecting society, perhaps limiting building on greenfield locations. The government has an effect on the level of economic activity in the UK by its withdrawal of money from the economy through taxation and the injection. So, withdrawal of money and injection of money through public sector spending. So, withdrawals of money here would actually be increasing taxes. So, we pay more tax, have less disposable income, and this reduces demand, reduces the economic activity. It could also inject money in the forms of spending on public sector spending, public sector services such as hospitals and education that we mentioned previously. Let's have a look at how governments use taxation. This can either be to encourage economic activity or discourage activity. Oh, smiley face, not unsmiley. So these are encouraging and further down discouraging. The government encourages savings, for example, by offering tax incentives such as tax relief on pension contributions. The individual here gets to keep more, and this encourages savings. They will also encourage donations to charity, for example, through the gift aid scheme. Charities can claim an extra 25p for every £1 donated, and this doesn't cost the individual. It encourages charities and helps charities. They also encourage investment into businesses, for example, through the Venture Capital Trust Relief. This is tax relief to encourage investment in these smaller, higher risk companies. There's also the Enterprise Investment Scheme. This is designed so an organisation can raise money to help grow the businesses, to encourage private individuals to invest in British companies. And then we have help for our startup companies, the entrepreneurs who build their own businesses. They're offered reliefs from capital taxes. For example, relief from investing in new plant and machinery. It stimulates business investment. Finally, the government discourages smoking and alcoholic drinks, so they levy substantial taxes on these types of product. It makes it more expensive to purchase, so it discourages spending on such items. They're known as demerit goods. Also, we have motoring, and there's two types of taxes here: vehicle excise duty and fuel duties as well.